This is the CFL This Week.
Welcome again to the CFL This Week, of course, where we love to talk about Canadian football. Labor Day just complete. And again, as always, so many storylines. And once again, we have joined together an all-star cast from all across the nation to talk about the game that we all love. And let's start with, from the nation's capital, heard on TSN 1200 in Ottawa, sportscaster AJ Jakubec. Thank you for joining us, AJ.
Great to be with you. Hoping for a little bit better football this week.
I'm sure you are. Hey, he's one of the smooth-sounding voices from TSN 1260 in Edmonton. Let's welcome Jason Gregor.
Hubs, how you doing?
Just a pleasure. Feeling great. Hey, he's the guy who developed the details, and then he split from TSN to become the voice of the Saskatchewan Roughriders on the home of Rider Radio, 620 CKRM, Derek Taylor. Derek, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Like AJ, I'm also hoping for better football next week.
Well, you know what? Let's start right there. Hey, the Bombers execute a big win over the Riders, and I think let's start right there with you, Derek. Who is the number one team in the Canadian Football League right now?
Oh, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. As much as they lost a game to Toronto, Winnipeg's played a tough schedule, and they have a really great record, and they came into Regina and absolutely bossed the Riders around in their own field. To me, it's got to be the Bombers.
3 interceptions thrown by Cody Fajardo. Your thoughts there, AJ?
Yeah, I mean, look, he's kind of skyrocketed from the time we saw him early in 2019. He had a shootout with Dominique Davis real early in that season, and he kind of thought, oh, maybe this is a coming out party for two great, inexperienced quarterbacks. And Fajardo's basically taken off since then and really hasn't had a game like that. So I think that's just a blip in the road when it comes to Fajardo, and I agree with Derek, and I think it's hard to imagine a better team right now than Winnipeg. Just you look at that Grey Cup game in 2019, you look at what they brought back, and that Grey Cup game they dominated both sides of the ball in the trenches on the O and the D line, and when you watch this team this year, yeah, they've had a couple of issues, a close game against Calgary at home and that game against the Argos, but for me, it's the Bombers all day right now.
But I mean, Jason, I find it really interesting, and I know you just can't look at the box score in these kind of situations. There's nothing spectacular when you look at these box scores, yet this team continues to win. How are they doing it?
Well, there are a few things that are spectacular. Look at their forced fumbles. Winnipeg has 9 forced fumbles. They have 6 recovered. No other team in the league has even 3 forced fumbles. The Bombers attacked to the ball. Willie Jefferson basically called his shot before the game and said the Bombers have never taken any heat like us, and he was bang on. Like, Winnipeg is very aggressive. They attack all over the field. It's funny how in sports when you build like a winning culture, and Winnipeg had that. I thought coming into the season they were the only team in the West that I felt comfortable in slotting in where I thought they'd finish. I thought they'd finish first because I think right now they're the best team, and it goes through cycles in the CFL. But Winnipeg is a very complete team. They're incredibly aggressive, especially on defense and on special teams, and on offensively, they just don't make many mistakes. They might not wow you with massive yards, but they just don't make many mistakes. They're very methodical right now, and they're going to be a tough out, no question.
But Derek, let me throw this to you. I thought coming off a bye week, I thought that was an important part. I think that for the Rough Riders to impress their crowd. Is there a panic in Regina right now?
Well, some folks are suggesting that they go to Isaac Harker at quarterback. Would that suggest there's panic? Yeah, there absolutely is. And it's the areas that we talked about going into the game all the way through. How would their offensive line do? An offensive line that essentially has its 3rd and 5th tackles in there from what they came into camp as. How would they do against an attacking defensive line? They escaped having that in the game against Hamilton, right? Where Jared wasn't real well. Dylan Wynn, got injured in that game, and the Riders were allowed to just kind of run free after that. Ted Laurent missed that game. How would they do against a line that attacked, and Winnipeg can get home with just those 4 guys? And heaven forbid they send Adam Bighill on a blitz, and it had Cody absolutely bamboozled. He said it was the worst game he ever played. When you saw that interception he threw to Jordan Williams-Lambert in cover 4, you go, oh, okay, yeah, I get it, because he just whatever he was seeing was not what Winnipeg was putting on the field. And yeah, Winnipeg looked so very good on both sides of the ball as they, in my mind, transitioned to a passing offense. They're going to be absolutely lethal.
When you take a look, I think, at that quarterback, Zach Collaros, I mean, how reborn is this guy? I mean, I'll be honest, from what I saw in Hamilton, and I remember his final start against the Calgary Stampeders, he looked disillusioned. He threw a couple of pick sixes. What's the differences with Zach Collaros under center right now?
Oh, for me, it's absolutely the protection. And you kind of saw that when they scooped him up, you went, oh, okay, working behind that offensive line and with a running back like Andrew Harris, who picks up the blitz maybe better than any other running back in the Canadian Football League, you think, well, Zach's going to have time. Confidence is going to build. And when you watch him play, you just see confidence leaking out of every pore. Oh, I'm going to run to the left. Now I'm going to run to the right, and I'm going to throw all the way back to the left. Come on. That's unfair. And he, you would know, well, he looks a lot like 2015 Zach, who could have been the MOP of the league had he played maybe even 4 more games that year.
AJ, what do you see?
Yeah, I think just confidence, right? I mean, I think probably you look back to his last year in Hamilton where he couldn't win a game, and he looked like a guy that completely lost his confidence from where he was back in 2015. And then, you put the best offensive line in the league in front of him. That's going to change everyone. I mean, look at the difference. And I get it, Matt Nichols, in terms of his arm, it's just not where it was pre, shoulder surgery and what he dealt with in 2019. But, look at the difference in Matt Nichols with an offensive line like he had in Winnipeg and what he's got here in Ottawa. It's a completely different quarterback. And I think confidence and just having the ability to know that you're going to have that extra second to throw the football makes a huge difference to any quarterback.
AJ, I'm going to stick with you here on our next little topic of discussion. And I got to say this, Montreal 51, Ottawa 29. Bigger deal, the Alouettes victory or the Redblacks loss?
Honestly, the biggest surprise for me in that game was that it was actually the over, because if you took the under in every Redblacks game to that point, you would have made a lot of money. But at this stage, I can't say that any Redblacks loss is a surprise, just given how poor they've looked on offense and just the injuries stacking up on defense. And, they are going to start Dominique Davis this week at quarterback, and he gave them some life. I mean, they actually scored 3 offensive touchdowns late in that game against Montreal. And, I think the Montreal defense took the foot off the gas a little bit, and that probably explained maybe the last score or two. But you could just see the difference, all of a sudden receivers that maybe didn't look like they'd ever be able to make a play, it made some plays in that game. And the difference with a quarterback that's a little bit more mobile, but more important, just the velocity of the throws that he had. And so, I mean, it's a tough one right now. I don't think too many people would be picking Ottawa week to week to beat anyone right now. And the strength of this team, special teams and defense, special teams still pretty strong, but you lost your long snapper and a couple of your key cover guys. And on defense, you lost a couple of corners and a D lineman. And so like the injuries are stacking up on the side of the ball where they're actually staying competitive. But it's kind of a work in progress week after week, but I will give Montreal, some credit, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Vernon Adams looked spectacular. And with Eugene Lewis, BJ Cunningham, and Jake Winnecke, he's got some real good options in terms of guys that can make plays for him. So it was a great win for Montreal, and for Ottawa. We'll see if they can kind of get back to being competitive this week in BC.
Jason, I want to stay on this Matt Nichols thing because it's a big surprise to me. At one time, he played in Edmonton and then I guess shifted over to Winnipeg. And at that time, I thought this guy was just on the rails of becoming one of the elite quarterbacks in the Canadian Football League. What's happened?
I'd probably disagree. I never saw him as an elite quarterback. I saw him as a good quarterback. but he wasn't close to Mike Riley. He wasn't close to Bo Levi Mitchell. And AJ just mentioned Vernon Adams. When I just look at pure ability, I don't think Matt Nichols is an elite level quarterback. Ricky Ray in his time was elite level quarterback. And, Matt's a quarterback that, if you put him in the right system, he can make plays. He's not someone that, I don't know if he's necessarily, like, he's not the most athletic guy. And AJ talked about his arm strength after the soldier shirt. I don't think he had a bullet arm to begin with. And now if he's lost any velocity on it, well, he's kind of throwing muffins. I was actually stunned that he even started that game. Honestly, I thought that was an error by the coaching staff. He clearly looked like he wasn't going to help their team in their previous loss. I would have started Dominic Davis, and I understand that there's a loyalty factor and everything, but for a coach, there's also, you got to put out the best guys who are capable of winning games. And right now, Dominic Davis is just better. So I'm not stunned, because I never thought that Nichols, I never had him as a top 5 QB overall in the CFL. Like, he might have finished top 5 one year, but to me, he was never a top 5 quarterback.
DT, you're boiling over there. What's going on?
Matt, can we all agree Matt Nichols is a top 12 starter in the CFL? Maybe that's it. But here's the thing I have, and AJ remembers well the absolute dazed look in my face week 2 in 2019 when Dominic Davis rained fire on the Saskatchewan Roughriders. 30 of 39 for like 370, 3 touchdowns, no picks. That was a top 5 game in the CFL last year. Apart from week 2 against Saskatchewan, he threw 2 touchdowns and 14 interceptions. Dominic adds an element that Matt Nichols can't, but Dominic Davis cannot win football games in the Canadian Football League on a regular basis. AJ mentioned it, Montreal's defense lays off, drives for 2 touchdowns. He threw 2 picks in that game too. Interceptions are going to hurt you way more than the single touchdown will help you. And I don't know why we expect any different from Dominic Davis. It's an offensive coordinator who essentially said, okay, yeah, you can leave Winnipeg and go to Ottawa. He goes to Ottawa, and I love Dominic Davis. I love talking to him. He seems like a great dude. But if you keep throwing the ball to the other team, if you're not accurate, none of the other stuff matters. And I don't know why it's going to be any different with an under-talented offensive line and a receiving core that is just not up to any kind of standard in the Canadian Football League.
Well, hold on, guys. AJ, let me just, before you answer that, let me throw this out and open up the scope here. I mean, you're talking about a franchise that once had William Powell and Greg Ellingson on their offense. I think, yes, we're talking about the quarterbacks here, but it's also about the talent that's around you. Did Marcel Desjardins, I guess by not opening up the pocketbooks, really hurt the Redblacks in the long run?
Yeah, I'd like to answer the Dom Davis stuff first, because I do think, let's look back to 2019. And I've talked to some players very recently about this, and they believe that Dominic Davis can win. So it doesn't really matter what the 4 of us sit here and say. If they don't believe that they can win games with Dominic Davis, then that's a problem in that room. They believe they can win games with Dominic Davis. So that's a start. I think when you talk to people that were here in 2019, it was a gong show, especially when you talk about the offensive side of the ball. They didn't have an offensive coordinator. Jamie Elizondo left 6 weeks before the season. We know what happened after that, the press release. Elizondo quits on Redblacks and all that kind of stuff. It's clear that side of the ball was a mess. And now you've got, in my opinion, the best offensive coordinator in the league in Paul LaPolice, who's also your head coach. You've got a quarterback coach here for the first time in Steve Walsh. You've got an O-line coach that's highly respected in Bob Wiley. And yeah, it's a young group, but I expect this group to get better week after week after week. Now, is that going to be good enough for this team to make the playoffs? Right now, it doesn't look like it. I think they do need more talent. There's no doubt about it in all aspects on offense. But short-term, week to week, this week, BC, that group believes that Dominic Davis has the skill set to lead them to victories, given what he can do. Now, he can't be throwing the ball to the other team. He can't be doing what he did in Saskatchewan with 3 interceptions in the first quarter, back in 2019. Can he eliminate some of those, with some help of an offensive coordinator and a quarterback coach? I hope so. We're going to find out in short order, right? Because if we continue to see that Dominic Davis, then this team has no chance to win if he continues to turn the ball over. But I do think that the fact that the players believe in him is at least the start, because if the players don't believe in you, you have zero chance. And right now, I'm not sure the players believe in Matt Nichols.
Jason, let me throw the other side of the coin here. What are the Montreal Alouettes? Are they the team that lost to Calgary and a rookie quarterback in his first start, but looks so good against your guys in the Elks, and again lose to Hamilton? Who are the Alouettes?
Well, the Alouettes are nobody if they don't get Vernon Adams playing. I think it's clear that, for most teams, you get good quarterback play in the CFL, you got a really good chance to win. And Vernon Adams was probably, to me, the biggest surprise early in the season, because I thought Vernon Adams was going to come out and be one of those young quarterbacks, and I still think he can be, but it just illustrates that when your top player at the most important position on offense is struggling, you're going nowhere. And all of a sudden, Montreal, now, it's against Ottawa, so, maybe there's a little bit of tempering the expectations, but Vernon Adams has shown in the past that he can be an exciting quarterback. He can win games for you. And it was interesting, just how emotional he was post-game, right? I think he's a guy who really cares a lot. And I think that sometimes his emotions were getting the best of him. You could tell early on in the season, and frustration was boiling over. I think Montreal, Hamilton to me is the class of the East. I don't really think it's close. I thought Hamilton was going to compete. They had a little bit of a slow start, but now we've seen where they're at. Montreal and Toronto, Montreal probably should be the second best team in the East, I think, right now. But second best in the East might end up being fifth or sixth best in the league again when everything plays out. I think Montreal is a competitive team. I don't think they're a dominant team.
Let's stay in the East here, and I guess this really can expand across the league. The Hamilton Tiger Cats, I thought put in a pretty dominant performance for 4 quarters, 3 all scoring from all 3 levels on offense, defense, special teams, and they grinded out a victory over the Argonauts. Now they're going to have 1 day off, 2 days of practice, and then they've got to play again at Rogers Center and meet that same team. 2 days of practice and 1 day off in a time where we're talking about player safety. Is this a total scheduling quirk? And I know we're dealing with a compressed schedule this year, but again, this isn't baseball. This isn't hockey where you can play back-to-backs. Are you surprised that the CFL have scheduled this out this way?
Well, I'll say I'm a little surprised but first of all, keep in mind that the Labor Day in Edmonton and Calgary did this for decades, played on Monday and Friday. Right? No one complained like it was the end of the world. The players just got used to it. And is it difficult? 100%. But it's something that was done for many years. And then they changed. What I'm a little surprised by is the easily scheduling change would have been to put Ottawa and BC Friday night, because Ottawa played Friday. So a Friday game isn't a push. BC's on a bye. And you could have played Toronto and Hamilton as the early game at 11 a.m. Mountain, 1 p.m. Eastern, then went with Saskatchewan and Winnipeg, and then finished with Edmonton and Calgary, and still had your triple header on Saturday night. So it would have seemed like an easy scheduling thing. It's one time. I don't love it for player safety, but again, having covered, 20-some Labor Day classics of Monday, Friday, it's not completely outside the realms. And when you look at what Edmonton has to do at the end of the season, playing on a Monday, Friday seems like a cakewalk compared to what they have to do.
Yeah,
Sorry, AJ, go ahead.
Blame the Argonauts. Blame the Argonauts. Blame Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. One of the frustrating things that Ottawa had to deal with at the start of the season when they looked at the schedule, and everyone had issues with the schedule, but some of the quirks in the schedule this year, Ottawa doesn't play Winnipeg. How does that make sense? I get, okay, you're playing 8 against the East and 6 against the West. Well, okay, you play one team twice in the West and the other 4 once. Well, they're not even playing Winnipeg, so that doesn't make sense. They're playing 3 games in 11 days, which they were supposed to get rid of, and they did get rid of because they played 4 games in 16 days back in 2017. Randy Ambrosie came in 2018 and said, this is never going to happen again. And so they brought the 21st week, so every team got 3 bye weeks. Well, this year, correct me if my math is wrong, but 63 games into 16 weeks, you should be able to fit that in where every team has 2 bye weeks. Well, the Redblacks have 3 bye weeks and are playing 3 games in 11 days. And what's the response that I got? MLSE gave 9 dates, count them, 9 dates that were available for their 7 home games. So that's basically probably why you don't have the flip of dates is that Toronto said, okay, well, we've got BMO Field on the Friday. We don't have it Saturday. We don't have it Sunday. We don't have it 357 other days of the year. Here are your 9 dates, so fit us in. And I'm sure that didn't help when they were trying to reschedule those games with the Elks as well. So, yeah, I mean, I get it. There's soccer there, and I'm a big soccer guy. I was at the game at BMO Field last week, with Canada playing Honduras, and they're playing again tonight against El Salvador, and you've got Toronto FC there as well. But you would think you'd be able to give at least more than 9 dates for 7 home games, and that's why we've got some of the scheduling problems that we do.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me that the Argonauts didn't play at Rogers Center there. I was in a time warp of something there. Derek, your thoughts?
I don't know what I can add to what the guys had. It's, you get what you get, right, with some of these facilities and stadiums. It'd be great if they didn't have to share it, but you get what you get, and anything's better than 3 games in 7 days. Imagine, Jason, if they had to squeeze a game in the middle of these games, then they're going to have to do it in November. That's going to be awful.
Well, Jason, and that's the point here, and I don't know who's to blame here. Of course, Edmonton have their issues with the COVID a couple of weeks ago. The CFL respond by not giving the Argonauts the forfeited win, and they redo the schedule, and now they're playing 3 days in I think, an unbelievably tight timeline. Again, I'm going to keep bringing it up. Player safety. I mean, that's got to be real tough on the bodies for these guys.
It is. They've obviously expanded the roster for those final 2 games. There's going to be 5 extra players, which really is going to mean that lots of players who are playing special teams and defense won't be playing special teams, right? I think that's where those 5 extra bodies are going to go, and that makes sense. So, that there's at least that where they've considered it. If I'm the Elks and I'm in a comfortable playoff position, I'm resting a lot of my guys as well. I think that's going to happen for sure. Whether it's the middle game of the 3, I'm not sure how they'll do it, but I'm kind of torn on that because when you look at like the Jacob Ruby story, it still pisses me off because there was no reason he had to lie. There's zero reason, right? The only reason he lies is because he was selfish and he wanted the benefits of being a vaccinated player. Because if you were unvaccinated, you still got to be on the team. You still got to play the games. You just had to adhere to a different rule set after 2 weeks. So it's purely selfish. I have zero sympathy for him. None. Like, we're in a time warp. We got so many selfish people. It pisses me off. Do what's better for the better of everybody else, not just yourself. So there had to be some consequences. The Elks were one of the lower vaccinated teams. And hey, trust the science numbers here. Derek's a number guy. He'll crunch it for you. He'll tell you pretty easily that, hey, guess what? Your odds are better if you're vaccinated than you're unvaccinated. And I don't blame, no one gets COVID on purpose, but there's consequences. And so Ruby paid consequences because everybody teaches their kids don't lie. So boo-hoo, I have zero sympathy for him. As for the Elks, it's, I looked at that scheduling. I'm like, yeah, it's not ideal, but the players agreed to it because they didn't want to miss a paycheck. And I understand that, right? Money talks. And so you'd have a lot of players that I think had they canceled that game, man, there'd have been a huge rift in that locker room because now you're literally taking money away from your teammates, literally. And so I think a lot of the teammates that feel, you look at the green and gold, I think their goal is going to be, guys, let's be in as good a position as we possibly can with those final 2 games, because it's really the final 2 games. The game against Saskatchewan's a normal break on the 13th, but then it's those final 2 games on the 16th and the 19th. And there's another one. They could have moved it maybe to the 20th with BC and switched so they weren't on Friday night. But I think you'll have some players resting in that time. And I wonder if the guys who had it will be the ones playing. We'll have to see. But I don't know if there was much other option realistically. I know it's player safety, but I'm also a big believer there's got to be some consequences when you make bad decisions. It can't just be, we're going to, because what we do in society now is we're pandering to the minority, and I don't like it. So I actually applaud the CFL for saying, hey, you guys screwed up. Here's the consequences. You can either get a paycheck and you're going to have to play a tough schedule, or you don't get one.
AJ?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I mean, what are they going to do here down the stretch? Like a team like Ottawa, for example, just in terms of flights, team like Ottawa, okay, maybe, the 5 or 8 or 10 guys, whoever aren't vaccinated, okay, they can drive to Hamilton. It's going to cost them their own gas money. I can tell you that. The teams aren't going to be paying for how they're going to get around. But what about when some of these teams in the West have to travel and have to get on flights down the stretch? They can all drive, from BC to Saskatchewan and so on and so forth. So, how's that going to work in terms of practice time? And I feel like it's just going to be a complete mess down the stretch once these new rules kick in terms of flights. And, but some guys are, stuck in what they believe, and that's fine. If they believe that, then so be it. But it is like Jason said, that's going to lead to consequences. It's going to lead to, if teams aren't at 85% and a game ends up being, if there is a fourth wave, right, that's going to affect everyone, but it's probably going to affect the unvaccinated more than it's going to affect the vaccinated. And if you get more teams with issues like the Elks down the stretch and they're not at 85% and it's going to cost a game and a paycheck, that's going to divide a locker room real quick.
Derek, let's kind of talk about the fans a little bit there, because again, correct me if I'm wrong here. Saskatchewan, Edmonton, Calgary started out the season with really no COVID regulations for fans entering the stadiums. We did have that in Montreal. We certainly saw that in Labor Day here in Hamilton. Those have been changed. What was the reaction from fans?
Honestly, it's tough to tell, right? Because some sides are small and yet have a real loud voice and will organize a protest of them and their 8 best friends who all have Sharpies and found the poster board aisle at Walmart. It's tough to tell, but honestly, like my neighbor next door is 71. He's about to turn 71, and he's been a season ticket holder for a long time for the Riders. And he just said, you know what? I just don't feel comfortable going this year. I'm double vaccinated, but I just don't feel comfortable. And I wonder, though we hear the other side of, well, I'm never going again, I wonder how strong the opposite of that is I wasn't comfortable, but now I will be, so I can come back to the stadium. And honestly, even if that's smaller, if I was running the club, even if that cost me money, it sets a good example for the rest of us. Like, hey, if you get vaccinated twice, and you are fully protected, here you go. You can have this. And this is the world as you remember it from, January of 2020. You can have this. There need to be benefits of this. The stick is not working, so let's carrot the people who have done the right thing, and everybody will eventually come around. Because, hey, things like flying to work opportunities in Hamilton, say in the second Sunday of December, those are pretty valuable, right? So that Saskatchewan, that the Riders got onto the carrot end of this. I really like it. I really like that they did this.
Jason, same response there in Northern Alberta.
Yeah, they came around a little bit slower than I would have liked personally, but they did. And it'll only impact their final few regular season home games, because you had to give people the opportunity to get the 2 shots in time. It's ultimately the right decision. I saw Ottawa yesterday announce that they're not even going with the negative tests anymore. You got to be double vaxxed or you don't get in. And I think that's the next step here. I think that's ultimately going to be the next step. And they're not going to force anyone. It's just going to be, as Derek said, there's got to be benefits for doing what's right for the collective good. And I think that's ultimately what's going to happen around the league. I don't think you'll have complaints at all. And I think, as AJ pointed out, I'm fascinated by the rule changes and what it's going to lead. I think ultimately you're going to see, eventually close to 100% for players to get vaccinated if they want to play, right? Because otherwise you're going to lose paychecks and you lose your roster spot, and then you can't play next year. And I guess the science is there. That's what I don't understand. Unless you have a medical exemption, I don't really understand the reason not to follow the scientists who have studied it for 20 years.
Let's end up on a fun one, guys. I'll start with you, AJ. Biggest surprise in the Canadian Football League through 5 weeks of play?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Bo Levi Mitchell being out helps with this, but I would say Calgary at 1-4. I mean, we're just used to, for the better part of 30 years, other than, a couple of years in between, the Wally era and basically what we've seen with the Huffnagel era. That's a team that you're just used to writing in pen that this is going to be a playoff team come November. And right now at 1-4, even with Bo Levi Mitchell potentially coming back sooner rather than later, I'm not sure this team is going to make the playoffs. So I would say just what we've seen so far from the 1-4 Stampeders.
DT, what's rocking your shock?
Oh, boy. I thought the Stamps would be bad, and they're not making the playoffs. They're done. They got 3 games against the Riders. They're done. Honestly, I'm surprised that Hamilton's only 500, and I get it, upon reflection, because they've had some real bad injuries, and they're still without their second and third best receiver. I thought they'd be a little better. I honestly thought Edmonton would be a little better, but it's good to see that both those teams are coming around. It's a real tough question because the surprise, it's Jake Maier. Jake Maier, that a kid comes off the bench and just starts shooting it up. Just, you know what? I threw 2 picks. Screw it. I'm going to try and throw a third one. I love the Jake Maier experience in Calgary. And if Bo could just hang out for a little bit more, I could get a little bit more Jake Maier in my life. I'm loving rookie quarterback just firing on all cylinders.
Jason?
For me, I think the biggest surprise early was just that the defenses were dominating. I thought after a lengthy layoff that it would be offensive, and we're starting to see the offense come around a little bit. And Trevor Harris had an interesting point that they really had no game film in their first 2 games because of, new defensive coordinators and then, in those places, or haven't been around for a long time. Now, maybe that's an excuse. I don't know. But the Elks offense has come around. AJ mentioned if Bo Levi comes back, but is he going to play defense? Calgary's given up the most passing yards and they've given up the most rushing yards defensively. Like this is a very weird thing to see because under John Hufnagel, the Calgary Stampeders have been the best team in the CFL consistently for a long time. But it's not just offensively; it's defensively right now that they're not very good at all. Like they're not really even that competitive. Like I can't remember the last time the Stamps were at number 9 in both defensive yards allowed and rushing yards. So to me, that would probably be the biggest surprise. And Bo Levi Mitchell, the league needs him, but in the last 2 years, there's been 23 games for Calgary. He's only played in 12 of them. So you do wonder, where's the long-term health of Bo Levi Mitchell? You hope that it's just a sense of an injury or 2 and that's it. But you do wonder if Maier now is going to be the future guy because injuries are potentially an issue for Bo Levi. That's something to monitor the rest of this year and next.
Well, folks, we're going into week 6. And again, we just some stimulating real topics of conversation there. We look forward to a couple more. Hey, Derek Taylor, AJ Jakubec, Jason Gregor, thank you so much for joining us here on the CFL this week. I think just outstanding contributions by all 3 of you. And what I love to hear the opinions. It's just a great stuff. And again, as I said earlier about the league that we love to criticize sometimes, but certainly the league that we love. Thank you so much for joining us. Folks, this has been the CFL This Week on the Tiger Cats Audio Network. We will see you next week.